hosting. I'll turn it over to Rich.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. There's some familiar faces here, and I want to welcome people back who've been guests before here at Source Scientific. And then there's some new faces here that I don't know yet, and welcome to those people who are here for the first time. We've hosted other OCTANE events in the past, and we're proud to do so. We're proud to be part of OCTANE. Source Scientific, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a medical device development and manufacturing company. We develop what we call high complexity instrumentation for use in clinical laboratories and other diagnostic and therapeutic areas. So we're kind of a middleman in the process. People who watch shows like CSI will see things like this diagnostic instruments being used in all kinds of applications, including forensics and things like that. So those are our customers, and if anybody is interested after the presentation, we'll be glad to show people around who want to know a little bit more about what we do here. Tonight we've got two speakers, and I believe Carl's going first.
Jeff.
Oh, Jeff is going to go first. Okay, Jeff Blanton, who is the president of Waypoint Leadership. And Jeff, I'm going to let Jeff explain his credentials to you. Is it too long? And then followed by Carl Jarema, who is a marketing consultant, high-tech and medical technologies consultant with IBM, Ford, General Motors, and a number of other companies. I'll let them speak for themselves, okay? So welcome everybody. This is, like Cynthia said, this is part of a series tonight, testing your business concepts. It's focused not on, a lot of the OCTANE programs are on how to raise money and things like that, but this is a little bit more advanced. This goes into how to build your business once you've raised money and you're trying to develop your company. So we'll welcome both of these speakers, and I think we'll start out with Jeff. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.
All right.
Well, good evening, everybody. So how many people here are budding entrepreneurs ready to launch off and go do that big, huge startup? We got one, two, three, we got a couple. All right, perfect. My introduction, remember me as the project guy. What we do as a business is we go into companies and we focus on the strategic project in the company, and our whole goal is to come in and accelerate that. And if you can knock a couple months out of a major project, that can be worth millions of dollars to the company. So when I look at projects and I look at startup companies, to me a startup company is a project. I mean, you're here, there's the dream, and there's probably a few milestones along the way, and by definition that would be a project. So the talk here is a little bit about how do you go and get these projects done. So I have 4 key points I want to deliver to you, and I'm going to start off with a story. I've been racing sailboats here in Southern California for about 30 years. And this story goes way back. It was like about 25 years ago when I had my first boat, and I was still trying to figure out which end was what. A friend of mine and me decided we're going to go to Catalina. We're going to go to Catalina Harbor on the backside of Catalina. It was Easter weekend, and so we take off. It's a Friday, and it's a beautiful day. I don't know if it rained that week, whatever, but the sky was very blue, but the breeze was very fresh. As we motored past the Coast Guard station, we had the small craft warning out, and we said, that's not a big deal. When we got out to the harbor, we did notice that we were the only guys in the harbor, so it seemed a little odd that 3-day weekend that someone else wouldn't be going to Catalina with us, but once again, we're going to go get it done, right, with chargers. But we were, trying to be smart. We had already had a reefed mainsail. We had a small head sail, so we were kind of prepared for the big blow. So a trip to Cat Harbor in a boat like that probably take you around 6 hours. We're probably about 3 to 4 in it, and we're heading towards the west end of Catalina, and the wind is building. It's right on our nose, and the waves are getting bigger and bigger and breaking over the boat, and we are completely overpowered. I mean, we're on our gear, and we're just kind of holding on for dear life here. And I said, well, we got to do something. We're going to have to reduce some sail area. So I proceeded to take a line, put it around my belt loops here, put the other end around a primary winch, and said to my buddy, if I go overboard, the idea is to crank me back and save me, right? That's great. So I proceeded to crawl up on the deck up there. We normally race this boat with like 7 people, and there's just the 2 of us now, so this was going to be a bit of a project. So I'm up there, the big wind, the waves, sail flogging. I don't know how long it's up there, but I did finally get that sail down and get back to the back of the boat and go, near-death experience. I've saved myself one more time. We still got like another hour to go. Wind continues to build. By the time we get to the west end, we had something like 40 knots of wind blowing. I mean, that's a lot of wind and a lot of big waves for a small boat like that. But when we got to the west end, we now made the turn to go down the backside of the island. So now you're running with the waves and with the wind, and now life is great. We've hit the big milestone. This is what sailing's all about. So I go to my friend. I said, well, I've never been to Cat Harbor. Maybe we should get the chart out and see where that is. So we had the boat all closed out, so he took the slats out, and he's proceeding to be standing in the companionway looking at the chart. And all of a sudden, this big shadow comes over the boat. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of weird, because there hasn't been a cloud in the sky all day. And as I proceed to turn around and look, there's this wall of water that proceeded to just go on top of us, completely pooping the boat. I'm standing in knee-deep water, the whole inside of the boat. And I mean, this is the kind of event that might sink the boat. So we realized we weren't cruising. This was serious. We didn't really pay a lot of attention. But ultimately, I'm here, so obviously we survived. We get to Cat Harbor, we pull into the harbor, and so all the waves go away, but I don't know if you've ever been to the isthmus, but that's like a little channel. So the wind is actually blowing harder through the harbor than it was out at sea. We come into the harbor, there's not a boat anywhere, except for the harbor patrol, who comes out to meet us, and he says, you guys want to get a mooring, right? They have the moorings over there. No, we don't. We're not funded for that. We don't have enough money to do that. We're just going to drop an anchor. So we proceed to drop an anchor. And I go scooting across the harbor at a really fast speed in reverse because the anchor wasn't holding. We proceed to do that 3 times. And after 7 hours at sea thinking you're going to die, our energy level's going down, and pulling up an anchor and the chain and all this takes a fair amount of work. On the 4th time, the anchor takes hold. Harbor patrol guy comes over, says, how do you feel about this? And I turn around and I look, and there's the beach is like about 50 feet from us. So if we, drag the anchor this time, we're going to end up on the beach. I said, all right, we're going to do the mooring. So one more time, we pull up the anchor, we go to the mooring. Moorings are very similar to pulling up anchor, especially when the wind's blowing like that. We finally get the boat on the mooring. The 2 of us are sitting there looking at each other going, oh. Harbor patrol guy comes over, says, I hate to tell you fellas, but I think the owner of this mooring's coming over. Can you move over one? A little more swearing. We moved the boat over, and completely exhausted, I think we just went to bed after that. The reason I tell this story is I think it's kind of similar to a startup company. I mean, it's an adventure. It's a long ways from the idea all the way to that safe harbor. When we were in Long Beach, we were thinking about Catalina. We're thinking on the back of the boat, drinking a beer, and it's going to be a great time. And how often you hear with the entrepreneur is, I can't wait till we get bought, and I'm going to go to the beach. So it's the same kind of idea, but the issue is between those 2 ports, there's a tremendous amount of things that are going to happen to you. And in the startup scenario, kind of similar to my story, there's a lot of potential near-death experiences. I mean, if the funding doesn't come through, or you can't quite solve the technology issue you have, any one of these things could actually just blow up the business. So you could be at this thing for a couple of years to find out that it just doesn't exist. And so it's a crazy, crazy process. But quite honestly, we don't know what we don't know until we get out there. So we just have to go out there and get after it. And the point is, to me, I think this is about a headset for the person that says, I'm going to go take on this adventure. I mean, you have to be prepared to actually go do this kind of work, where every day you might have that near-death experience where you didn't expect that big wave, but there it is. And then you recover and you go play another day. So my first point is really, you got to get your mindset about the adventure. The second, or the other part of this is that, how many times have you heard the story of the company that started, and what they started with is not what they were successful with? So the same idea that the person leading this business, you can't be so looking at what's going on inside the business that you're not paying attention to what's happening in the marketplace out there. So part of the adventure is also paying attention to what's going on out there. So for example, when that big wave was behind us, if I knew that, we could have positioned the boat to actually ride the wave rather than getting the big douse from the wave. So for the entrepreneur, it's really important to realize that this is a tough game, and there's a great opportunity to do some things, but we also have to be smart about what we're doing. The second area that I think is a big concern is time. Time is our enemy in this environment. I mean, we all know that time is money. So the spigot's been turned on, we got some financing for wherever it came from, and until this business actually starts churning out money, we start getting something back, this is the commodity that we're really most concerned about. And so the time-money equation is huge. There's the flip side where money is time, where we're smart about how we spend our money, right? Because we can buy time. But the reality is our biggest fear is how long does it take for us to get things done and what's it going to cost us? Exposure. If my 7-hour trip turned into 14 hours, who knows what might have happened? We might have had a major mechanical failure. Someone might have got hurt, right? I think the same thing is true with businesses. If your 3-year program turns into a 6-year program, what happens in those last 3 years? What if one of your key employees decides to leave? What if your competition shows up in the marketplace before you got yours out there? So every moment you're out there, you're exposed to these dangers. So once again, time is the enemy. We got to just drive forward. I also think time really rides on our confidence. So if you got your investors, and you told this great story to your friends and family that 1 year from now we're all going to be going to the beach, and 2 years later we're still just talking about the beach, your money sources might start to get a little funny for you. I think it's true with your team. I mean, you start to feel like you're losing the game here. You start to lose that drive and the morale that you need to drive through this stuff. And yourself, as the leader, I mean, the more that clock ticks, I think the more difficult things start to become. So time is our enemy. I just want to touch on a couple things here. So the answer to this is speed. So just a couple things around speed. Focus, focus, focus. But what do we focus on? I think it's really important that we focus on the value-driven kinds of things, right? I had a boss once said, I don't care what the measurements or how successful we are inside the building, it's how successful we're outside the building. So we need to look for those measurements to say, you know, it actually got done. And in this case, what are the value drivers? What are the things that actually increase the value of the business? That's where we need to focus. We really have to have really almost a sniper's focus on that type of thing. 80-20 everything. Are people familiar with the 80-20 concept? This is where 20% what you do gives you 80% of the result, and the other 80% you're just spending a lot of time. Once you set your plan, you say, okay, this is what we're going to do, then go do the 80-20 exercise and say, what's the 80% that I could cut out of this? So if you did 80% less work, I mean, just think about the savings you're going to have in time. The key is figuring out what the right 20% is. The other thing to drive speed is we need to discover early. Back to the comment that we don't know what we don't know. So, you know, we do certain things to try and accelerate our knowledge base. So say, for example, we got some technology risk that we have. Let's get that part designed, prototype, and out the door. Let's not wait until, oh, I'm waiting for the green mold housing to see what the market thinks about that. Too often we try to get the finished product. Let's focus on things that we really are concerned about and the things that have risk and get those out there right away to make sure we're putting the risk away. It's the same thing with marketing feedback. I think internal to a building, we can, you know, kind of drink our own Kool-Aid about what the product is and what it's going to do and how successful it is. But until we actually get out there and start asking people, we really don't know anything. I'll even share in my business as an example. Our tagline for a while is we said, well, we turn around projects. We turn around troubled projects. And we go talk to a CEO and they go, oh yeah, projects are troubled for sure, but we don't have any of those, right? No one's got a troubled project when you talk to them. We flip that around to we accelerate projects, and that becomes a business proposition. It changed everything. It was very subtle, but it changed everything. So you need to get out there in front of people as quick as possible because you need to find out what you don't know. So it's all about speed. And the other thing that really I see on an ongoing basis is the internal processes. I think that's one big sinkhole for us, that we just have to be really careful about that. We spend a lot of time building all this infrastructure in the building, and that's not what we're there for. We're there to get a product design and out the door and into the commercial market. But meanwhile, we're spending all this time internally arguing about how we're going to do the work. So we have to pay a lot of attention to the internal process. So just a couple ideas on how to speed things up, because time is one of our most critical aspects of all this. And the last piece, sense of urgency. I mean, how do you create a sense of urgency in the organization? You want people thinking the building's on fire every day, right? I mean, that's the goal here. John Cotter, he's one of these management gurus. He wrote a book back a while ago, The 8 Steps of Change Management. He found out on the 8, if you don't have a sense of urgency, the other 7 doesn't work. So that's actually a book. I highly recommend it. Kind of the cool part of it is he talks about the false sense of urgency, and I think we all kind of get sucked into that one. Number 3 is fear, and I think fear in the organization shows up 2 ways. One is the risk bar. You know, what is our risk tolerance in the business? And the other one, what's good enough? Kind of on the risk side, I worked with a CEO, and his whole thing was, this is a zero-sum game. He goes, we had nothing when we started. If we have nothing when we end, well, what the heck? But I'm going to shoot every bullet, every gun that I've got along the way. And that might be a little more than your risk tolerance, but it's a reality in the organization that we have to define where we're at. If we're trying to manage our startup like Medtronic or Johnson & Johnson, I doubt we're going to get there. And so as the leader of the organization, you got to figure out what's going to be acceptable for us when it comes to risk. And that, I do a lot of work in medical device, so that comes up all the time relative to regulatory issues, because a lot of it is very gray. And most regulatory people say, oh, we got to go way over here, but that could kill the business. I've kind of coined this the functional curse, that this is Lentonism. What the functional curse is every functional group in your business is trying to do the best job possible. So you got engineering over here saying, if I just change one more thing, it'll be the perfect product. Marketing saying, if you just gave me 4 more things, it'll be the perfect product. Regulatory saying, I'm trying to keep you out of jail, and we can't make it risk-free enough. So as everyone's trying to do the best job possible, the problem is you end up with this mountain you're trying to get over. I'll give you a little war story of a client of mine just recently. The FDA came in for our audit in preparation for commercialization. And in the audit, the FDA said, well, we don't like how you validated your cleaning process. On the spot, right there, our QA and regulatory people actually negotiated the answer. They said, well, if you tested it like this, then we'd be happy with that. Okay, great. When the FDA leaves, we have the big meeting, and they tell us, here's what they said. But the internal team goes, well, that's really kind of interesting. In fact, if you really want to do this right, you would test it like this, right? So next thing you know, we got the FDA process, and then we got the other process. The team that's going to do this thing now goes off and says, well, let's go write the protocol. Well, if you really want to do this well, what you'll do is dip this in some motor oil, only do half the cleaning process, and then you'll really know what's clean. Well, the bad news is that we passed the FDA piece, but then we failed this new internal bar that we created for ourselves, and they were tied together in the same protocol, so here we are sitting with the smoking gun in the organization. Long story short, that started to spin out of control from, oh, we don't have the right cleaning process, to the specs are wrong, and blah, 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 to finally you had to get the CEO involved and say, here's our choices around risk. Which one do you want to do? Well, guess which one he picked? He picked the riskiest, and then he moved it even riskier. I guarantee you the team would have come up with the least risky and would have added to that. So this is what we're looking to manage, and this goes on all day long in the organization. So how do you drive that kind of thinking into the organization of what's good enough and what's the risk tolerance for our company? And the last thing I think that also fits into this is we never have enough information, right? I mean, we never have all the data to know exactly what to do. And so I think often we just keep churning and churning and churning versus we know enough, let's move forward. The last piece here, number 4, of potholes, the things we got to look for is the team. Kind of back to the sailing analogy, I mean, you're going to war, right? I mean, we're on this adventure, and so who are you going to go to war with? Well, I think there's 2 casts of characters. First off, you have the internal group. And I think when you're hiring this first gang and you got 4 or 5 people in your company, I don't care if they're a VP at whatever company and what you call them now, but ultimately they better be a functional expert. So if you hire an engineer, it takes them 3 iterations to get the design right. That could be worth 6 months to you. Some other engineer could have done it in 1. So you need people that really truly know their art or their craft. We're a small business. They got to be able to multitask. There's not a staff to do anything here. One minute you're fixing a leak in the building, and the next thing you're writing some big protocols. So you need people that are kind of really well versed. I think you also need to hire people that can get behind this whole risk tolerance that I was talking about. I worked with a company, and I hate to say it, and I think there were some other contributors, but our regulatory guy ended up having a nervous breakdown. I mean, he came from a big company environment. He thought, I heard the story at least 5 times that we're all going to go to jail, and a friend of his went to jail and had diabetes and lost his leg. I mean, that was where he was operating out of. And our CEO was the guy with the zero risk thing going. And, I mean, the poor guy, put him over the top. So you need people that can get behind, what it's like to be in a startup and get that we have some business goals here. It's not all about your functional area. And of course, the last piece, it's got to be a team. It can't be, it's all about my functional area. We truly have to be a team. And then there's the external team. You got the sort of scientifics of the world, right? And we need them. I mean, in reality, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, for you to go out and put in a clean room and do all the things it takes to have a manufacturing facility in your startup if you're going to build a bunch of parts just for test. then you're going to wait another couple months, build some parts for a clinical, then you're going to wait a couple more months to go do something else. The overhead, the expertise, and all the things associated doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's where you come to the sort of scientifics, for the manufacturing side of things. Same thing from the engineering side. But the issue is, you have to make sure you're matching up with the right vendors. So if you go in, you got your big $300,000 development project, but next door to you, they've got the $3 million electronics project, you're probably going to have a little difficulty getting their attention. So you really need to match up with companies that get your space, work with other companies your size, get the kind of the starts and the stops that goes along with the startup, so you can get the appropriate attention. But the other part of it too is, I don't care who they are, I mean, your business is never going to be as important to them as it is to you, right? I mean, if you blow up tomorrow and they got 10 other clients, I mean, their life will go on. So part of the challenge is how do you enroll these guys in that business? They're never going to be quite where you're at, but you need guys to get the seriousness and the timing and all the things you're trying to get done. So those were the four. First, recognize this isn't your Saturday afternoon walk in the park. I mean, you're about to go on a major adventure. You're going to have these kind of death rides once in a while, and I think you just have to ask yourself, do I have the right DNA for this? Is this really what I want to be doing for a living? So that's really important. I'd also say that if you've been in a startup as in one of the functional roles, that's not the same as leading the program. It's an entirely different story. Time is your enemy. I think you just got to battle that day in and day out. Every day you come to work, you got to ask yourself, what are we going to do to accelerate this program? What are we going to do to accelerate this? And challenge a team on a regular basis. You got to set the bar here for the fear factors. What's good enough? What risk are we willing to take in this business? And get that established. And once again, drive that into the business, because you're not involved with all the decisions going on a day-to-day basis. So you need to get the organization around that. And the last piece, you got to get a team. You got to get a crew that you can count on. The old adage in sailing is you never go to sea with people you don't know, because when you get out there and things get all upside down, you need to have people with you that you can count on and trust. And I think it's the same thing here. This is a difficult haul, so you need to have good people around you. But you're supposed to be having fun, right? So the bottom line is, this could be the most rewarding thing you ever did. I mean, I'm telling you a story from 25 years ago because it was a life and death experience, right? And I think, startups can be similar. I mean, the challenges that come up with this, but the rewards of being successful, all leads to, just life-changing, besides just the success and the money, but just an experience that's going to be great. So that's it. So we're going to Q&A.
So, Jeff, hang around. After Carl's presentation, we'll do some Q&A.
Sure.
Okay? And by the way, I have my own story in the sailboat. I thought you were literally telling my story. I have the exact same story, going out, leaving Long Beach, headed off for Cat Harbor, et cetera, with one difference. And when you get to the point where you said there's a big shadow and you didn't know what it was, when I turned around, it was a big freighter.
I've been there too.
Yeah. It was a big freighter coming our way, and they don't turn, so you have to back quickly. Okay, excuse me. Carl Graham is next up. He's going to give us his presentation. Then, like I said, we'll do some Q&A, so you can ask your questions to both these guys when we're done.
Well, thanks everybody for this opportunity to present tonight, and I'll have to continue on in the sailboat story. My story is a little bit different than the other two. Whilst in County and enjoying a delightful Thanksgiving dinner, Harbor Patrol rolled by and said, we got Santa Ana's coming. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the pictures with Avalon and Santa Ana's, but just like Jeff said, the wind blows in, the harbor gets narrow, the waves build. Beautiful weather. We thought the guy was crackers. There was just no way that this was going to get ugly. So we went back to the boat, and the guy says, so you got to get out of here. I said, I'm not going to sea in the middle of the night when you're telling me winds are coming. So he said, all right, you sit on the boat, but you got to watch the lines, right? And watch the lines all night long, make sure they don't chafe, you don't let loose, because if you go off this mooring, you're going to go right up on shore. So the moral of the story is, sat up all night long watching the moorings. Two things you need to take away. One, my mooring was fine. I could literally lift the line off of the cleat with my bare hands. And I mean, it was blowing, and the waves were coming in. My problem was the guy in front of me, who was in a power boat. This thing was out of the water 50% of the time more than it was in the water. And I was worried that he was going to break loose. The other moral of the story is, my line was, we're going to be okay if it doesn't get any worse than this. So that's what I want you to take away from tonight's presentation. We want you to not be in a position where the best thing that you can say is we're going to be okay if it doesn't get any worse than this. So I'm here to talk to you about marketing. I've raised my presentation in terms of the pitfalls of marketing. You've already heard I've got some experience in big companies like IBM and Microsoft. I've also got some experience with companies that are smaller, $20 million private equity-owned firms. And I can tell you, as funny as it may seem, regardless of the size of the company, people make the same mistakes in marketing, and you can take some comfort in that they'll make those mistakes over and over and over again. So I want to bring to you some of my experiences, and hopefully you'll be able to use them to avoid some of these kinds of problems. The first thing that you need to do is determine the product price. When you go to market with a product, critically important, one of the baselines is to know how much is the product going to cost the customer. Two approaches that have been used are: one, cost out the product. What does it cost in material? What does it cost in production cost? What are the distribution costs in terms of sales? What's the overhead? What is the funding cost? Add all that up, determine a price, take it to the marketplace, and decide how many of them you can sell at that price. That's a good approach to take. The benefit of taking that approach is that you got some idea, if you've done your homework well, what you're going to be able to bring to the marketplace and how many you'll be able to move. The challenge is you need to get the costs right, and you need to understand what the prices are. An alternative to that might be to determine a price that the market will pay and then build the product to that cost model. And of course the challenge there is if you get the cost model wrong, you're already done before you even started. Put all the work into it, you get to the market, and you go to the market, you determine the price, you come back, you build the product, you find you can't do it for the cost that you need to in order to deliver the price that your whole business model is based on. So the trap here is that you determine a cost, you have a cost, you determine a price, there's not enough margin in it for the investor return, whether that's you or somebody from externally that's helping you fund the project. Another concept is stating the value proposition. You have to go out and get inside of the mind of the people who are going to consume your product. They're going to buy your product. They're going to make a decision about whether or not they want to bring your product into their operating environment. So you got to think about it in terms of what can you do to help them increase market share? Are you going to bring them expanded offerings? Something that they can use to bring more people to their doorstep and generate more revenue. Another way to look at it is what can you do to increase their revenues? Is there an additional value that you can give them that they can then pass off to the customer to generate more folks in their building or to generate a higher price for the product that or service that they're offering? You can offer them decreased costs. So if they're doing something today, you find a way to do it cheaper. The end result is that reduction in expense goes right to their bottom line. And then you can also think about it in terms of customer retention. Are the customers more satisfied, so they come back for more procedures, or they're going to bring other customers to the doorstep? The trap is that if you don't define the value proposition well, and this is a challenging thing to do, then you don't have customers that are compelled to buy the product. Defining the target market. The trick is to define a market so that you can go into that market and sell where you'll win. It's very unlikely that you'll have the resources to compete effectively in the entire marketplace. So the trick to this is to turn it around and say, given the resources we've got, given the product we've got, how do we position this against competitors in the marketplace so that we can win share? And in the marketplace, winning share is what it's all about. Because if you're involved in a highly competitive situation, you're burning a lot of resource to win every deal that you go into. So go to your potential customers, talk to them about the product that you have to offer. If it's a new product, ask them how they can use it in their environment. If it's an improved product, try and understand what the differences are between the existing product they're using and the product that you're bringing to market so that you can articulate that effectively later on. Who are the competitors in their market? Understand their weaknesses. Who are the collaborators? And this can be very helpful when you're trying to put a marketing plan together to determine what's it like to compete in that marketplace? What's it like to take product to customers in that marketplace? And people that are already in there doing it that you can collaborate with will be a great source of information for you. Industry research firms can be invaluable. If you go out and ask a customer for input, or if you ask a competitor for input, you're not going to get the real story. A lot of times industry research organizations can do that work for you, and it is extremely time consuming, and they'll get a more accurate and effective answer for you. So take advantage of them wherever they're available. Bottom line is, not defining your market means that you will have the insufficient share to be able to be successful in that marketplace, and it'll be too expensive for you to be able to compete. Positioning the product and company. Once you've done all that research and you really understand who the market is, it's critically important to define your product and to articulate your product in terms that will differentiate from your competitors or the products that are available in that marketplace. You have to state your product strengths, but you have to state them relative to competitive products and what competitors can bring to that marketplace. You have to determine what the weaknesses of the competitors are, and you have to exploit those weaknesses. And they can be very subtle, but if you bring it together with the product strength, you can really define a very convincing product positioning. And then ultimately, you got to consider the company or the collaborators that you go to market with. What are the strengths that you bring to the marketplace? What are the strengths that you bring to the customer in terms of providing them with that product, creating new products, and ultimately supporting the products that you're providing to them? If you don't do this, you have an undifferentiated offering. And that means you go in, you've got a story to tell, but the customer is not as interested as they need to be to move forward and make a buying decision. How do you get the word out to the market? Informing the marketplace. You could just take out commercials at the Super Bowl and your work would get up. But it's very, very expensive to do that. And that is a broadcast an idea that will fall on a lot of deaf ears because it's not important to those folks. So inexpensive but effective ways to bring your product to market, inform the marketplace, use the conferences, the trade shows, and professional organizations. People who are sensitive to what it is that you're taking to the market. Use internet and social media wherever you can in order to be able to generate some awareness of the product that you have. Use targeted marketing and advertising in professional journals. And then finally, wherever you can, leverage your successes and create some press releases and get them out into the media so that you'll be seen on a regular and positive way. Trap is, if you have a low product, you may, if you use the wrong approach to get the word out, inform the marketplace, you'll have a low product awareness, and ultimately you'll have the high marketing costs if you use the wrong approach to informing the market. Picking the routes to market. There's so many different ways to deliver product to the customer. The traditional way, the IBM way, is you just have a big sales force. And you just put those feet on the street, you go in and call on those folks, and they're a great group of bright people, and they tell a great story, and it is extremely expensive. And it's extremely time-consuming if you're starting from zero to move to the point where you have a professional and effective sales force. The beauty of having a professional and effective sales force is that you own them and that they're interested in your product. Their attention is not split. So there's advantages to doing it. But as Jeff said before, time is the enemy. And getting those folks, getting a direct sales force that is trained to be able to market the product, and a professional sales force that can penetrate the accounts where you need to move the product into, very time-consuming process. Another alternative is channels. The benefit of channels, if you identify the right channels, there are folks already in those channels that are calling on the customers that you want to move product into. So you just leverage the work that they're already doing. The downside of it is you don't control those people completely. So you've got to be very clever in terms of how you motivate them and how you keep them focused on your product and how you measure their successes. And then alliances. Alliance is not somebody that will sell your product for you, but alliance is somebody who has a common interest. It's a win-win-win situation. So you take a product and service to a customer, they're interested in it. You have an alliance partner who is providing one component of the service, you're providing another component of the service, so you split the work up so that you have a broader coverage area with the same amount of people. And you're getting the benefit of some of the work that other folks are doing and some of the exposure that they have into potential accounts that you want to target. The trap is that generating the sales revenue is just too slow or too expensive. And then finally, complacency. You've got a great product. You don't just sell it, And heaven knows you want to hold down those marketing costs because they're intangible, right? You really don't see the benefit of the marketing cost until well on down the road. Of course, the trap here is that you'll have invested all the time and money of creating this product, funding the product, getting the product ready to go to market, and it won't get out there in a timely fashion, or you won't win the opportunities that you should be winning to establish yourself in the marketplace. Thank you very much.
Got questions? We lost our host. Any questions for anybody? Carl?
Questions about sales?
There you go. Got those stars. Guess we did a bang up job.
I guess so.
You mentioned social networking. How much do you think that's a risk versus an asset?
I think it really depends on what you're trying to do with social networking and who you're trying to go to with social networking. So the question is there some stream of information that's already occurring, some network of information that's flowing that you can piggyback on? It may be possible to do that. You might be able to benefit from it. There's maybe less risk in doing that. So that's an approach that you might be able to take, but it is complex. That probably requires some input from folks that are, highly skilled in that area. Yes.
Can you give me any examples of how you might use social network?
Social network?
Yeah.
Well, if there is an issue that's in the industry that you're serving, and if it gets to be active on a social network, the question is, can you monitor that social network, or can you add information to that network that will raise the awareness of your product?
How do you balance off the need for speed and the need to have it right, such that even though you may be first to market, the product you bring to market is a complete disaster, and your slow, plodding competitor comes to market with a product, basically takes it over.
And I think that's probably a question for both of us.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Yeah, the question was how do you balance the issue of bringing the product to market with speed, but also ensuring the quality of the product so that once it gets to market, it's well received. And I mean, that's really the key issue, because we know that a product that goes to market that is a mistake is almost irrecoverable. You almost can't recover from that kind of an issue. So I think using the techniques that I talked about of investigating the marketplace and testing the product with people that are already in the market or that are going to use the product is what you have to do. And then when you deliver the product to the market, you have to constantly have feedback, because the question is even more important than you might think, in that the product has to continually improve or it will die of its own weight. So it's extremely important to establish a feedback loop with your prospective customers and to leverage that loop and include that input in future product development.
I'll chime in. I think there's a really fine line. I have a client that a lot of the early designs are almost kind of like your Hail Mary pass. I mean, we just kind of throw something against the wall, run out and get it to clinical, and seemed good enough, and then only to find out 6 months later we couldn't make it or had all kinds of quality issues and didn't really perform the way we wanted. And then things shifted to more of a plotting, very process-oriented, almost way too far the other way. So part of it's really a fine line that I think you have to walk within the organization of your processes and your philosophies about how you go about developing products. Because we do want to get it done, but doing it fast and having something that doesn't work, that's the worst, right? Because now you think you got it, 6 months later, all of a sudden we're back to the well again, trying to figure out how to get it done. So you need to have some process. There's the checks and the balances. You clearly know what the customer's looking for. You're testing for those things. You know, a lot of my work's in medical device. We've got lots of checks and balances as we go, but it's still, the procedure's the procedure, but how you manage that process goes back to having really robust people in the building that really just know the right questions to ask. I'm going to go back to, you got to hire really, really good people.
And I think that's true, and I would just reinforce that those folks have to be disciplined. They've got to have good leadership. Somebody kind of holds them to the mark, and you just have to keep doing a process over and over until you get it right. Continual improvements.
You mentioned two methods for pricing medical device products. And based on a bill of materials and overhead burdens, what would be a range of profit margin that you would place on a product if you use that method?
We had...
In the medical device arena.
Okay. We had this discussion earlier today, Rich and I did. And the conclusion that we drew is it depends. we'd actually talked, of the time that we spent together, we spent most of our time talking about that issue specifically. And I was trying to find a way, a mechanism that we could bring that information to you, and it's just so product specific that it wasn't something we could really collapse into a slide or a group presentation. So it really depends on the type of product and the market that the product is going into. All of those things need to be very carefully considered in order to accurately cost the product and price the product.
Using the second method, how do you determine what the market will bear?
That's research, and that's the trickiest thing to do. I'd rather have Rich's job and determine what the product cost is than determine what actually people will pay for it. But it gets back to understanding the market and targeting the market and positioning the product. If you can do a good job of understanding your value proposition, how your product is different than anything else. In two examples, you may be improving an existing product, and there may be some cost benefit to doing that, and that can translate to a price advantage. The other alternative is you may have a product that nobody else has, and you may actually be creating a market that doesn't exist. And so then you have to try and determine, what's the value of that market. And maybe you have to go in and do some pretty creative ROI, return on investment analysis. But it's a feedback loop, and the information comes from so many different sources.
If I could add, build on that a little bit, because our business here we're doing this calculation over and over again for our clients. And as a rule of thumb, you want to triple or quadruple your cost if you have a raw cost, because people underestimate what it takes to get that product to market. And if you want to end up with a 10 or 20% margin for your company at the end of the day, you have to triple or quadruple your cost. And then the other method of assessing what value do I bring to the buyer, if you can determine a value that brings you 10 times your cost, there's nothing wrong with that either. Okay, your investors will get a quicker return on investment. But if you do the value proposition calculation and you figure out I can't sell this product for more than it costs me, and you're in the wrong business. Quickly consider your business model. How's that for another two?
Thank you. No, that's
a very direct question.
Make a lot of money or get out.
Yeah.
You'll make it up in volume.
What the question wasn't meant to stump you, it was meant to elicit your vetting information. Thank you.
Yeah, but to that point, you should also include what the payer rates are. It's worth the conversation with the medical director of one of the payers to hear what their thoughts are to get it on formulary and reimbursement rates. So if you're not going to get on formulary, you're not selling the product.
True.
And so a lot of our clients have made that mistake. They don't have a reimbursement code, and they figure that they'll sell the product or service anyway, and it turns out to be a huge uphill battle. So I see a shaking head, but you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think reimbursement's right under the FDA approval now. You got a strategy around it, and you
Yeah.
got to start managing it early in the program.
Early in the program.
Jeff, you talked about speed. Can you quantify the effect to the company for cutting 6 months off their development project? How the advantage in getting to market earlier will offset the maybe additional costs they have to spend in the R&D?
I can't quote you what the model is, but I actually have a model where you plug in the numbers of the value of time versus the investment in the project. And I actually got that from Steve through John Onopchenko. So yes, I can do that.
Okay, that's a good one.
But I think Jeff made a point in his presentation that we should probably reinforce. And that's that the more time you take, the more unknowns enter into the equation. So competitors could enter the market. Things could change. It makes it more difficult to see the end point if it's further away.
You know, I'm a big advocate for the small companies. I've been in small companies where, you know, how much money we have and all that's kind of a secret. You know, just go to work. I'll worry about that kind of stuff. I think you need to enroll people. I mean, first off, when you're hiring them, you got to say, hey, we're in a high-risk environment here. We're a small company. Yeah, we got some funding and we got some hills we're going to take. But I think part of the focus and the decision-making, the risk tolerance, all those kinds of things, I mean, you got to manage. You can't be walking around trying to scare everybody every day. But, I mean, I think you enroll people in the whole picture so that they get what we're trying to do in the business and not, you know, here's dad, here's the kids kind of scenario. So, I mean, I think you really try to enroll people in the fact you're not just here to engineer things or do marketing. You're actually here to help build a business, which is the excitement part of being in this entrepreneurial space. And if you just want a functional job, you know, go get the J&J job or whatever. But building businesses is a lot of fun. So, you know, include people in that process and what you're up to, and include people in on the money-raising side of things. I think that all helps to help drive focus and energize people. And it's a hard stop. If we run out of money in 3 months, we're all going home. So we better get this thing done. So we're going to figure out what's important in this project.
Any other?
Yeah. Carl, could you comment on what you look for in picking a distributor or that wrong?
Yeah, picking a distributor is complex because the question, I think the key question is how do you keep them focused, right? And there are people that are competing for their time. If they've got an entree into a customer, there's a limited amount of time they're going to get with that customer, and so there's a limited amount of exposure that they can give a given product. So the trick is, the idea is you have to determine what distributor has access to the marketplace that you're after. Who is calling on the people that you can move product to? And again, back to determining the market share, you had to very clearly define who those people are. So you're not wasting time where you're not going to win the business. Initially, and I would argue even later on, you need to focus on the opportunities that you know you can win. Don't waste your time on the others. So that's that selective target marketing that I'm talking about. But the challenge to distributors is to put together a motivation scheme in compensation or in terms of training or just mind share, so that when they're in front of the customers that are a potential for your product, that they're going to be talking about your product. And of course that gets to the training aspect of it as well, that they know what to say so that the customer is going to be interested in what it is that you have to offer.
Isn't it dangerous to try to go in to the incentive direction more so than the chemistry or strategic fit or whatever? Because it seemed to me like you're entering into distributors have a wealth of different products, and all of a sudden you come in and you're trying to gain the salesman's interest through some type of a spiff or something like that. Is that ultimately, it's productive in the short run, but is that natural? Is that a thing that's going to really help you in the long run? Is that the best choice of a distributor?
When I'm thinking of compensation on that term, I'm not thinking in terms of spiff, but I'm thinking of it in terms of a compensation model, so that they're adequately compensated for the time that they put in winning a success, right? Because if they put time in and they don't win, the value of it is zero. So whatever it is, depending, and again, this gets back to the individual product. If it's a complex product or a simple product, is it consumable? Is it something that's capital? You approach it differently. But whatever it is, you have to financially motivate the person to put it on the top of their portfolio, so that when they have an opportunity to present, your product gets presented first.
When you're advising someone on a new project, to bring a new product to market, in a market which today seems to be expanding, assuming you complete the project, the product comes on board, and you're going to make a lot of money. What sort of external data do you look at to try to project what that market will be like when that product starts to roll out a year or 2 years downstream? I ask it only because Printtronic, the founder, spoke this morning at the Harvard Business School, and he saw a need for printers and mini computers, and they lucked out. They got profitable in a short period of time, and the mini computer market collapsed. By then, they had enough money, venture capital financing, they could expand the product line. I mean, do you do any of that?
I don't do that. That's would be Carl's looking at the market.
Yeah, and some of that is crystal ball.
Yeah, but I mean,
some of that is good fortune, but not all of it is. Right? I mean, who would have guessed that Hewlett-Packard? Who the heck is Hewlett-Packard? Don't they make calculators?
Hey, they were founded in a garage at Stanford. They had to be successful.
Who would want to enter into the consumer marketplace for printers?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of crystal ball stuff. But again, I think the trick is if you identify a market that's a target for you, that you can be successful in that market, establish that success, and expand, then you limit your risk. You try and go after too big of a market, you're going to be bumping against other people, spend the same amount of effort, you won't win as many deals, and it's harder to get the traction and get moving along.
So I don't have a sophisticated answer, but it kind of goes back to my thing about keeping your head up and watching what's going on around you. So you're all trying to get from point A to point B internally, what you're doing, but the there's all kinds of things going around you. So, in your space, you should be an expert. You should be talking to people. You should be going out and networking and seeing what's going on and figuring out, am I working in the right space, or am I hearing about an opportunity? There's opportunities floating all around that no one's grabbing, right? Because they don't know how to execute, or they can't get it funded, or whatever. If you know how to do that, you just need to be aware of what those opportunities are. So, to me, I think it's getting your head out of the boat, looking for the waves that are going by, and saying, where else can I go with this thing? And then I had an investor tell me, always invest in things you know, right? And so he says, well, you know, boating, right? Should have invested in the marine hardware store 20 years ago. You would have made a fortune, right? Because you know you had a need there. So this is your space. You know that space inside and out. And I think the crystal ball starts to become clearer for you. But it's a matter of getting outside the building and paying attention to what's going on.
The flip side of that point, Jeff, is work with investors that know the space. Because
There you
they'll
go.
help you to understand what the real potential are for the products. I'm in the medical device space. It's easy for us. We know what the prevalence and incidence of disease is, so we can just go out and look at that. And interestingly, the guys that are good at doing breakthrough technology products don't spend their time in that space because it's a whole different methodology that they use for evaluating potential.
And also establish a feedback loop and keep cycling through it so you get new information as it comes available.
Okay, any other questions?
Let me just make a closing comment. In the interest of saving the forest, I didn't bring a copy of the presentation. If you're interested in it, give me a business card. I'd be happy to email it to you. I belong to a group called MedDev Execs, MEDDEVEXECS.com is our website. And not only do we have folks like myself that are capable in marketing, but we also got folks in operations and law and all of the aspects of business management that we can bring to bear. So feel free to contact me if there's anything I can do to help.
Ditto. It's all let's be.
Okay, well,
Accelerate.
I want to wrap it up. Some people have asked for a tour of the facility, so if you want to do that, come see me as we break up. My partner Bruce Sargent and I would be glad to walk you around and show you what we do here. Or if you have a better Catalina sailing story than our three stories. At that, I want to thank everybody for showing up. Thanks for being part of OCTANE, and we'll see you at the next event. Okay?
Much better than ball. Really just